But as I was writing this message here that I'm about to show you guys, I got this about 3 weeks ago, and I just was kind of sitting on this because I didn't know when I was going to speak this. But it was something interesting that happened, I guess, last week. And the more that I kind of looked at this, it's been a lot going on out here in this world. And I might talk a little bit about that, but if I do, I do. But if I don't, I don't. But really, a lot of people are are tough. Everybody talks tough, and they make it sound like it's really, they're tough people and all this other stuff. But really, who really wants to fight? I think sometimes we really don't want to fight. We just act like we're tough so we don't have to fight. That's what happens to a lot of people, especially when you start to get older. You say, man, I really don't want to fight, so I'm going to act tough so I don't have to fight. But I guess it hopefully that's the way you guys feel about that. Y'all really don't want to fight. But I will say this, but what happened down there in Alabama, it was a guy, he said that this week. He said, man, lucky I weren't there. I'd have been out there too. And I'm thinking like, you? I'm thinking like, you would have been out there trying to fight? I was like, man, somebody would have hurt you. But this is what the guy said. So he was so enticed and enamored by what went on that he said he'd have got him some. He'd have got some. Yeah. And so my dad know what I'm talking about, but yeah, he probably would have. And I said, okay, man. I had to bite my tongue when he said that. I was like, whoa, okay. He might have been going to the hospital. They wouldn't have took him to jail. They took him to the hospital. They just said, man. But this is what everybody thinks. But I'm going to show you guys something today. But look, hey, if you want, let's fight. Let's fight. Since everybody thinks it's the cool thing to do, and we like, because when people start fighting, nobody goes and usually tries to break them up. One guy did. I saw the guy trying to break the thing up, but everybody usually gets their camera out. That's the first thing most people do. They just get their camera and say, all right, they gonna fight. All right, I'm gonna get this on video. So, if you are one of these people, hey, let's fight and see where this takes you. But I'm coming out of 2 Corinthians 10, and we're gonna start at verse 3 here. And I think you guys will like this because I'm gonna show you guys something very interesting in there. And look at this. And this is where Paul is talking to the Corinthian church, and this is where he starts off at. He says, for though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh. So he already starts off saying, man, look, we walking in this flesh, and as long as you're in this earth suit, you're in the flesh, but we don't war according to your flesh. So if you ever get this, you will be set free really, really quick. And the faster you learn this, the better off you'll be. Because look, he explains it in verse 4. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal. Our weapons are not carnal for what we're doing here, but mighty in God for pulling down strongholds. So our weapons are in God for pulling down strongholds. And the stronghold is a fortified place. That's what we're pulling down, these fortified places that the enemy has usually set up. That's what we're pulling down. So we have to fight and war and wrestle in the spirit because these are not carnal weapons. So as many guns as you have, they're not no good. They're not no good. In God's war, your weapons are no good because people, that's who they're put their trust in. They say some put their trust in hope and chariots and all this other stuff, but we will trust in the name of the Lord. So that's who we trust in. So it doesn't matter how many weapons you have or how good you think with your fists. Our weapons are not carnal, but they're mighty in God. So that's who we're going to have to trust in for pulling down these strongholds. And look what it says. Because you're casting down arguments. Who does that? When we really look at this, do we really want to cast down an argument, or we like being in arguments? You're saying we're casting down these arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God. Almost every time you get into it with somebody, it's usually some type of argument that's usually not godly. Most arguments we get in are usually not godly arguments. And see, those are trying to exalt themselves above the knowledge of God. And that's why it's so interesting when you do argue with people that aren't spiritual believers, it makes it really easy for me to walk away because we're not even arguing the same thing. So your argument is way different than my argument because I'm trusting in something else. I'm trusting in the knowledge of God. You're trusting in the knowledge of argument. That's why they have those debates. See, people get really, really smart and really, really wise, and they be like, oh my goodness, I know a lot of stuff. That's just head knowledge. That's not godly knowledge. See, godly knowledge is more like wisdom. See, you have a different type of knowledge. You can count all the way to 2,000. You can 2,000 times this, and you add all these numbers up. Yeah, that's really good. Doesn't help me none. Yeah, it's not really going to help me deal with you just because I know some mathematics. That really doesn't. So I need this knowledge of God. And look what knowledge is. Knowledge is a fact or condition of knowing something with familiarity gained through experience or association. So our knowledge of God is going to be our association and familiarity with the things of God. So we're on a different level. So that's how you get the knowledge of God, when you become associated and familiar with what God is doing. Because we're trying to bring every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ.
Yes, yes, yes.
Christ never messed up, so he was obedient in all things. So he's saying, look, that's really what you're shooting for, the obedience of Christ. That's what we're trying to get to, is the obedience of Christ. See, we're not trying to get to the world standard of, all right, man, you said this, so I'm allowed to respond or rebuttal to this. See, what really happened, and when you're looking at life now, whatever you're dug in, that's always going to be correct to you. But that's not always the knowledge of Christ. See, if you're with a certain political affiliation or you're associated with a certain race or demographic of people, that's what's always is correct to you.
That's right.
It's not God. See, because just pay attention, and that's just human nature because we're in this fleshly body. Because usually if a black or white guy is fighting, I'm rooting for the black guy. Doesn't matter what he did. Doesn't matter what the other person did. I'm usually rooting for that because that's just what my flesh tells me to do for some odd reason. But I have to look past that and say, man, but what does the knowledge of God say about this? Who's really correct in this situation and how they handle this or what's responding in this situation? See, so that's what I look at now. So I have to have the knowledge of God when I'm assessing certain situations in life because these are not carnal. This is a spiritual thing that I'm dealing with. And then, so look, the last verse, and then I'll give you a couple points here. And it says, being ready to punish all disobedience when your obedience is fulfilled. And I'm not going to touch on that one yet because I got something I really want to say at the end. But, it's going to be hard to do that if you're not in the correct positioning. That's why I'll just leave it at that. But this is one of the first points that I want to touch on right here is that we always fight in the spiritual before the natural. If you're going to be a true warrior for Christ, you're going to have to make this a spiritual warfare before you touch the natural. You're going to have to do this because he's telling you that they're not carnal. So if it's not carnal, I would just assume that it's spiritual. And so we have to fight in the spiritual before we ever touch this part. And I'm learning to do this, and God is taking me through this process, and I'm getting better at doing this now. So anytime I usually have an issue with a person, I had an issue with this guy. And man, I was really upset. And I wanted to go to war. I did. I wanted to go to war. But I didn't. I didn't go to war. So I said, all right, Lord, I'm going to wait. So the next morning I went and I prayed about this situation. And I wasn't really upset no more because usually when you don't jump on a thing right then and there, you kind of can calm down. You could think straight anyway. And so I said, all right, Lord, I'm giving this over to you. How would you have me handle this and blah, blah, blah. So didn't say nothing else about it. And I didn't hear nothing from God at this time. I didn't hear nothing from God. It wasn't like God gave me the green light to do this or to go to war or whatever. But, before I go to war, I consider the cost first. That's usually what I do. I count the cost before I actually go to war. And so I didn't say nothing. God didn't give me no answer about this. But so I see the guy, but he had wronged me, did some interesting things. But before anything took place, he came, apologized for everything that he had done to me. Never said a word to him. Just showed up. He saw me, I saw him, and man, I'm so sorry, man. I shouldn't have did this to you. I shouldn't blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, well, that's why God had me wait because, see, our weapons are not carnal, but they're mighty in the knowledge of God for pulling down strongholds. And so I say, man, God went and worked this situation out for my good before I even touched this situation. But see, a lot of us don't even get to that situation because we want to give them a piece of our mind, knowing we ain't got too many pieces left. Once you get older, you ain't got a lot of peace of mind. but you do. You want to give everybody a piece of your mind and be ready to attack anything that comes your way. But I guarantee you, if you do what the scripture is saying, God will go before you and work these situations out better than you can even work them out.
You fight the battle.
And that's who you really want him to fight your battles. You don't really want to fight your own battle. I told you, you talk tough because you don't want to fight. See, but imagine when God comes to somebody in a dream or a vision, how that changes their life. Like, hey, man, you better not touch my anointed again. You thought that flat tire was bad. Imagine having a flat nose. Things could change. But really, truly, man, one of the things you do, you fight in the spiritual before you touch any other arena. And just really, truly believe that. But then also, this is the other one. This is because this is the one too, because for we walk in the flesh and we do not war according to the flesh. And that's why you fight in the spiritual first. But the next one is, we must fight fair if we want God's help. So you can't cheat at this. There's no shortcut to this God thing. So you can't go and spit in somebody's coffee when they're not looking.
That's right.
You can't do that. So you can't do these shady things that some people do. I don't even know why you feel good about doing stuff like that. You know, people that do crazy stuff like that. But if you really want God to work, you're going to have to fight fair if you want him to help. Because God is holy. He can't go underneath the table and do what you want to do. He can't do that. I was discussing with somebody and they were all upset and they were, oh man, well this and they did this and they did that. And I was like, well, I said, why do you expect them to fight fair? I said, they don't have no rules. But God didn't say because they're doing unscrupulous things that you can do unscrupulous things also. If I want God to help me or intercede on my behalf, I have to follow his rules. Yeah. This is his playbook. I can't go past his playbook and expect him to help me. And I can't pick and choose what I want to use in this fight. Yeah. You got to do it all. You got to bless your enemies. You got to love because it covers a multitude of faults. You know, and these are the things that you have to do. You can't pick and choose and say, all right, Lord, strike them dead. Because and that's what the Old Testament was, what they were saying, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. That's cool. If that's what you want to use, keep that same energy when it comes back on you. Use that same energy. Else, come on over to the New Testament and say that you're living under grace also. Which one do you want to do? Do you want to be Old Testament or do you want to be New Testament? I'm usually on the New Testament. I'm under grace here. A gentleman told me, he said, man, that's so good that God is moving and doing all this other stuff, man. He said, you deserved it. I said, nah, I don't deserve nothing. I say, hopefully God never gives me what I deserve. As I told the guy, because he's seeing the good. I remember some bad things that I did. I said, hopefully I never get what I deserve. So you be real careful when you talking about, hey man, they deserve this. Nah, we deserve some stuff too. So you pray for your enemies like God says and love them where they're at and let God fight your battles. You let him work these things out on your behalf because you're really warned in the spiritual. It's not a natural thing. See, we get caught up. It's the natural, but no, it's spiritual things that we're wrestling against. And everything that usually any kind of warfare that I encounter now, I usually be like, yep, it's a spiritual thing. It's not really natural. It's not the natural. No. At least I look past the natural now because I say, man, I'm dealing with that spirit. I'm really not dealing with that person. See, when you don't like that boss, you be like, oh man, my boss is this and that. No, man, it's that spirit. See, he sees something in you. He said, Christ within you, the hope of glory. So you know, when you look at cartoons and look at the Avengers, man, the evil people can't help but do evil. like why do we even get this messed up, man? You know, the dude is out there cheating on his wife, he's cussing and they're doing all these other things. Why do you expect him to treat you correctly? Like, I don't expect you to treat me right. I know what you are. And so the more I go and intercede in the spiritual for you, now God starts to work and move and shift and do things better than I can. That's the way this goes. And so look, and that I'll skip over this verse because I'm not gonna need it. But the next one is you can't punish anyone till your obedience is complete. And that was that verse I touched on, because we usually can't speak against the thing if we're doing that thing we're trying to speak out against.
Yes.
And see, that's why it's so interesting in politics, because the hypocrisy there is just baffling. It's baffling because they're saying that they want you to follow the rules, knowing that they never follow the rules. And see, so that's why usually in God's kingdom, we can't say nothing, else you're a hypocrite, you're an actor, you're performing, if you're not doing the correct thing yourself. See, you can't tell me to go to church if you don't go to church. See, you can't tell me to treat your brother right if you're not treating your brother right. See, those things I can't do. I can't speak out against any of these because I'm being disobedient myself. And so if you want to try to punish somebody for their sins, your obedience has to be complete. You got to say, Lord, I exhausted all my avenues. I can't do nothing else. You do what you need to do. Go ahead and handle that because I'm being obedient. I'm doing what's right in your sight, God, because I'm following your rules and your statutes that you've given me. So I can't intercede no more. You have to do what you need to do in this situation, because that's the scripture that I'm talking about here, and being ready to punish all disobedience when your obedience is fulfilled. Fulfill God's obedience. We had a great God to look up to. Christ within us, the hope of glory. Jesus Christ laid out a perfect example of what this thing should look like. And that's why we can punish disobedience once our obedience is fulfilled. And we can speak out on these things. And I had another verse also in here. And this is what Paul said over in 1 Corinthians 9:27. He said, but I discipline my body and bring it into subjection. Or he brings it into submission. Okay? Lest when I have preached to others, I myself should become disqualified. We can't do that. We need to be the example that we want other people to see so they can't disqualify us. I see so many Christians all the time. They do the things of the world, and then they try to preach to the world. And then the world says, well, look, man, I saw you doing the same thing that I was doing. How can you preach to me about what I'm doing, and I see you doing the same thing? Yep. So now myself, I've been disqualified in this thing. And that's what Paul is saying. This can't happen, because if I'm going to preach to you or witness to you, I have to be in good standing order with my God.
Yes, you do.
You have to be, because we're all living epistles. The world is watching you. The world is watching you. I got a chance to go speak at a church last week. And I sat up here and I spoke at the church, and then they let the guy come in after me, and he kind of closed us out. But it was a guy I knew, and he talked about how great I was. And I'm sitting like, who is this guy talking about? I'm being serious, because I was like, man, I did all this stuff. But in my eyes, doing and walking this life out correctly, he had been watching everything I was doing. He was watching everything. And I was like, man, I didn't know he was watching my life that closely. and these are the things that we take for granted sometimes. Man, people are watching your walk, they're watching your talk, they're watching your life. Because when this guy said what he said, I almost wanted to look behind me and say, like, man, who's doing all that? Yeah. I did, because, man, he gave me some really good compliments. And I was like, man, I didn't know it was all that. I didn't know I was made such an indelible impression on this gentleman's life. But it wasn't me. See, it's the God in me. See, and I always I don't like taking credit for none of these things. I'm just telling you guys these stories because, man, it's God. He saved me. He's the one that gave me this mind. He's the one that tells me to treat my brother and sisters right. So now when I'm finished preaching, I can say I'm not disqualified because I'm bringing this body into submission. So I do. I beat this body into submission. I tell this body what it's going to do. I don't let this body tell me what it's going to do. See, if you cuss me out, I'm going to keep on pushing. Just don't cuss my wife out. You cuss my wife out, now I'm going to have a problem with you. But you can cuss me, but you better not cuss her. And the reason you can't cuss her because I don't cuss her. See, I'm ready to punish all disobedience because I'm obedient. But yeah, if you got a problem, have a problem with me. Would you have a problem with my wife or my kids? I say, man, we might not be warring in the spiritual. We might have to get physical. And hopefully we don't have to do that. And I'm saying, hey, my brother, I'm praying for you. Please keep walking. But I don't disqualify yourself by your actions and the certain things that we do. But let me show you guys this. This is just a bonus question that I just threw in because God was revealing this to me. And most people never get to spiritual warfare. They never do. They never do. Most Christians never get here because they're so busy warring in the natural that they never get to the spiritual. That's what the Lord was revealing to me. I was like, man, Lord, but this and that. But most people never get to spiritual warfare because all they want to do is devise a plan in the natural of how to get over on this person or take advantage of this person or just really try to pay this person back for what they've done because they probably have wronged you. They probably have wronged you, but give it to God. It'll be so much easier. It'll be so much better when you truly give it over to God. And now you're fighting, letting God fight your battle instead of always having to devise a plan to get yourself ahead and to work these things out. One of the greatest things my dad said last week, because I was one of those guys, I said, man, we got to have a plan. We got to do this. We got to do that. And then I truly started serving God, and then your plan just go out the window. But what my dad said, he said, I didn't know how I was going to get to point A to point B. That was it. I was like, whoa. I said, that makes a lot of sense because man heart plans his ways, but the Lord directs his steps. And it's so much better when God starts to shift and move and direct your steps and you start to war in the spiritual and God starts to move things out your way. And it usually starts with working on you. See, that's where God usually starts at. He usually starts with me. He usually starts with you. But we as human beings always tend to say it's always everybody else. It's never us. So if you truly want to get to where God is taking you, war in the spiritual on yourself first. Try to attack some of the issues that you have first, and God will start to line up good things in your life. He will start to shift and move other people out of your way. But you got to get to spiritual warfare. This is not a natural thing. Get out the natural, because when you start to walk in the spirit, good things start to happen because that's what God wants us to do. Just imagine if all these great evangelicals that are chasing after these politicians were walking in the spirit. Imagine what that looks like if each and every one of us walk in the spirit and we actually get in tune with what God is saying and how God is trying to shift and move us. Your moves start to get even better. It's like playing life with a cheat code. That's what everybody wants. Everybody wants some help in this life. They can honestly say it. See, that's why everybody wants money, because they want some help. They think money helps them. But God will help you in the spiritual realm, and he'll shift and move some things better than any money can do. Better than any amount of money. So we're still trusting and believing God, and I continue to fight in the spiritual for the things of God. I'm shifting, I'm moving, and God's working on me each and every day. Hey, he's working on me to fight this spiritual battle to make sure I do these things correctly. But don't fight as the world fights. There's plenty of benefits to fighting in the spiritual way God is leading us to do it. So continue to keep that in your forefront of your mind and continue to let God move and shift us into everything and trust God's process. He has the best process for us. It's going to be way better than any and each and every one of us can ever get to.